pleased and honored to introduce Dr. Lori Lambert. She has it's a long list of the wonderful things she has done, and I'm sure you can read about her more if you go to the speaker's part. But I've known Lori for, gosh, for a long time, and we're doing some wonderful work together on a getting a story out on a book about first American Indian experiment in space. It kicked off the American Indian nation as in space, like Sputnik, but this was called. No, I didn't give it a name, by the way, but it was like Sputnik for us. So it flew on Discovery on June 8th, 1998. So I'm pleased and honored to introduce Dr. Lambert. Dr. Lambert, please take it away, and I can't wait to hear your story.
Walalined, kwai mataluin, welietsit puk, nin daluisi kunik, Wedgie Caribou Crossing in Pablo, Montana, Wedgie Lentuk. Waliuk, everybody. I'm gonna ask to share my screen now. So I decided to call my presentation Indigenous Research Methods and Why They Matter. And this is the location of the tribes in the Wabanaki Confederation. I'm an enrolled member of the Abenaki Nation, and the Wabanakis are Micmac, Maliseet, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot, and Abenaki. And this is our traditional homeland. It's Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Quebec. So our traditional regalia is this hood, which people copied from the French. Usually girls get it when they have their first puberty, and I got mine a long time ago. So I'm going to ask you a question about who has the right to create knowledge and by what means. Is it Native people, Indigenous people? Is it only the universities who are allowed to create knowledge? Is it only scholars, or is it our ancestors? Why does it matter? Let me see, I gotta try to get this out of here. Okay. The history of research among Indigenous people, and many of us already know this, but non-Native people may not know that people came in and to the communities without permission or consultation, no contact with Indigenous people. They weren't respectful of the culture. There was a researcher who came onto the Flathead Reservation, and he took all of the information from the elders about plants, and he wrote the book Ethnic Plants of the early Salish and Kootenai people. And the people never said that this was an important thing for them to be involved in. So Indigenous people were objects of curiosity. They were seen but not asked or respected. So I've interviewed a lot of people over the years about what they want researchers to do when they come into their community and what they expect researchers to do. And most of the elders just say they're nosy, they want to get rich off us, they never ask what we need. And the most important thing is they take the stories and write the book on whatever their professors want and never give back. They never tell the people what they found, and it's in a language that they don't understand. There was one woman that I interviewed in Churchill, Manitoba, and she said to me, of all the people who have researched in our community, you're the first one who ever came back to tell us what happened. But there's a lot of change in Indigenous research now. And we know the names of these famous researchers, especially Linda Smith and Oscar Coagley, Sean Wilson, Maybe you don't know Bajeli Chalisa. She was the first Indigenous researcher who started the Botswana Indigenous Research Association in South Africa. You probably have heard of Vine Deloria, Maggie Kovich, Joe Gone, Kukaleka, and Sweeney Winchief. And Sweeney Winchief's book is on the lower right here, Applying Indigenous Research Methods. And he was inspired because he came to the American Indigenous Research Association conference, and that inspired him to write this book. So there's a lot of books out there. You can go to Amazon and you can just Google Indigenous research books and they'll be coming up. So Winchief said, and he divided up who is the Indigenous researcher. So it's the Indigenous researcher, like us, conducting research in our own communities or with the population of Indigenous people, or someone who is Indigenous going to a non-Indigenous community, or a non-Indigenous researcher conducting research in an Indigenous community. And that person will have to take a lot of lessons. So we have always been researchers, and I presented at Bozeman one time, and a student came up and said, "Wow, I didn't know that, and thanks for telling us." So, you know, that we discovered beans and squash and corn grow together. Smoked buckskin is waterproof and unsmoked is not, and learned by trial and error by watching animals what plants treated certain ailments, and discovered that aspirin and willow reduced fevers and the yew plant or rose hips prevented scurvy. So learning from animals, I spent a lot of time up in Churchill, Manitoba, and they have stories about their elders learning how to hunt seals. And so they would watch the seal, and the seal would come up in the blowhole, and they would get ready because they could see the vibricium, or the whiskers on the seal, start to move. So they developed a spear with a wishbone and some feathers. And they knew that when the seal came up, the feather would move and they would be ready for their hunt. Our research from our own paradigm informs Western science. What happens when you breed a black horse with a white horse? So informing Western science, there was an elder, Ojibwe elder, her name is Ojimakwe, and she learned a lesson as a young girl, how older trees give protection to the younger trees. And that is happening with Suzanne Simard from UBC. And she tested the older Douglas fir trees and showed that they provided carbon to their saplings. And here's a picture of her with her student. And she found out that the carbon is transferred through the mycelium of the fungi. And you can see a picture here of the fungi underneath. So that traditional story is helping Western science figure out, okay, this is really something that's happening. We have Indigenous research in engineering. People invented flax fibers, and they used them as roof shingles, and the weight reductions were required. And Blackfeet teepees are low and squat to the ground because of the high winds in Browning. And they researched that because it's part of their environment. It's a local phenomenon. And here's some of the amazing buildings of research in engineering for Native people. Also, research in pharmacology. They've discovered that the cloudberry plants have a chemical that helps prevent miscarriage. And they have done modern analyses on these, and they found high magnesium, and it's still used to prevent miscarriage. And here's a photo of cloudberries. They're kind of like raspberries, only they grow only in the Arctic, and they're red. I know the Finns make some beautiful drinks out of it. And in astrophysics, the stars we know, there's a lot of history of the constellations and sense of place in the universe. And Salish Kootenai College had a Bison Cube satellite, and they developed the cameras for the first Mars rover. And here's a photo of Salish Kootenai College, where I taught for 22 years. Beautiful school, love the students, and a picture of the Bison Cube satellite and one of the students starting to set it up. Also, Ed talked a little bit about the corn plant, and 10,000 years ago, there was no corn, just a small plant like a grass called teosinte. And today, corn feeds over 10 million people. And I'm sure you've heard of Three Sisters farming, where the people plant corn, beans, and squash. And the corn plant takes out the nitrogen, the beans replenish it, and they also climb up the corn, and the squash covers the soil so that there won't be any dehydration. And this really originated with the Haudenosaunee people, or the Iroquois. All those vegetables are a result of Indigenous research. Here's a photo of the Three Sisters farming, and I stole this off the internet without any citation. So you can see how it looks. The beans are climbing up the corn stalks, and the squash right here is all over the ground to prevent the weeds from growing. So the Western and Indigenous scientific method is not so different. It's all observation, making a hunch or a hypothesis, and then gathering information from that hunch, seeing if it happens again, and observation again. So you can see that the scientific method for Native people and Westerners are the same. But we're looking forward, but we're reaching back, and we're, as researchers, solving problems for our future and remembering our paradigm, history, and ancestral knowledge. And this is an elder up in Micmac country in Maine, teaching this student how to make Micmac baskets from the ash tree. So Indigenous research, it targets a local phenomenon. It's place-based. And instead of using a Western theory, it defines its research issue from the local phenomenon. And as Ed said, we can do integrative Western and Indigenous theories, mixed methods, also called two-eyed seeing. And this is a theory that Albert Marshall, a Micmac elder, developed. And Ed talks about two-eared hearing. It is context sensitive and creates locally relevant methods and theories from local experiences and traditional knowledges. It makes assumptions about what counts as reality. Knowledge and values in research are informed by an Indigenous paradigm. So what is a paradigm? What does that mean? It is a belief that concerns all of these things: culture, ceremonies, land, the natural world, prayers, artifacts, history, clothing. That's a belief that Indigenous people have about their own paradigm. It's how a culture views the subject, how it is accepted by a culture, what is studied and researched, the type of question that's asked, and we'll go into this a little bit more, the exact structure and nature of questions, and how the data of the research is analyzed and presented to the community. Also, I want to add to this is data sovereignty, that the community owns the data. It's not the university or the researcher. It's owned by the people. Okay, let's try here. But really, the name is misleading because if you're researching in a certain community, the paradigm comes from that community, and either it's the researcher's community in her own community, or in a worldview from other Indigenous communities that the Indigenous researcher is working with, like the Yupik or the Salish or the Micmac or the Hawaiian paradigm. So I really want to get something straightened out here, the difference between methods and methodologies, especially in Indigenous research. So you know that ology means the study of. So methodologies is the study of the methods that's appropriate for data gathering in that specific community. You have to think and learn about the community before you decide on what method to use. And then the method would be how the data is gathered, and the decision to apply that method would be unique for each community, whether it's face-to-face meetings, talking circles, oral histories, art, seal hunt, potlatch, but never a mailed paper survey. The Indigenous researcher puts themselves in the research. And these are really some important questions. Why do you want to do this research? What is your role as the researcher, and how are you fulfilling that role? And does the method allow you to fulfill the role in this relationship? And how are you changed by the research? And if research doesn't change you, then you're not doing it right. Why do you want to do the research? Do you want to do it to get tenure? Do you want to do it to get a higher pay salary? Or you want to doing it to help the people? So if you're writing your research question, how can Indigenous knowledge inform the research question? What do the people know? What have they told you, written, created, or sang songs, or have oral stories about your research problem? The community partners with the researcher, and their knowledge can help inform the research question. So when you're in the community, these are the 5 R's of community Indigenous research: respect, relationships, relevance, resilience, and reciprocity. And I will go into those more in detail. This is a lady from Churchill, Manitoba. She was the woman who I interviewed who said, those researchers, they never come back to me. They just want to get rich. Why Indigenous methods matter. So back in the day, lack of respect for Indigenous people and who they are, not just as individuals, but as a people. Building relationships in the community, go to events, be seen, eat the food, participate in activities, eat the beluga, eat the moose nose. So many researchers who come into communities are ignorant of the relevance for alternative worldviews, and they have a failure to acknowledge Indigenous people's knowledge. Reciprocity, both in knowledge and in relationships, giving information back to the community, and in a way that the community understands. They are not going to read the book, they're not going to read the paper. You have to go there and present face to face in ways that they understand. And then resilience, why it matters, how the question is asked. This shows the strength of the community. For example, instead of asking, why do the kids here and why does their environment make them believe that smoking pot will be beneficial? Instead, asking about what are the elements in this community that prevent students from smoking pot or doing drugs. I hope you can understand the difference. So the choice of methodology, the topics that you can research, how the questions are asked, the form of analysis and presentation of the data. Generally, Indigenous research and researchers, it comes from the heart of the person who's doing the research. And if you are an outsider, you have to live in the culture of the community. You have to be there, go to the basketball games, go on a seal hunt. The tribe selects the problem and the agenda, and they partner with the researcher in what is research. The researcher goes to tribal council and has to get permission from the tribal IRB, Institutional Research Board. And we talked about this a little bit. How is my research demonstrating respect for the natural resources, for the culture, for the history of the people, for the ethics of the community? And am I in collaboration and cooperation with the tribal Indigenous culture and government? Did I ask for permission? Am I staying for tea or staying for any other kinds of food? How does the research that you're doing as a researcher empower the community? How does that research contribute to self-determination of the community? How does that research promote recovery from historical anger, loss of self-esteem, loss of tribal identity? How does it protect our natural resources? How does it protect cultural values? Who owns the data? Is the data given back to the community in ways people can understand? Comes from the heart, the passion, why you want to do this. This is beeping. The important thing is also the research question and how you ask. And I talked about this a few minutes ago. And if you're doing some environmental inquiry, you can ask, why are bees dying in this ecosystem? What are the elements in this ecosystem that allow bees to flourish? There's a lot of ways that your research question empowers the community. So why do we need a conceptual framework? You wouldn't go into the forest without a map or go hunting without a map, but the conceptual framework makes visible the way we see the world. It reflects on the researcher's perception of reality and how the research empowers the community. It can demonstrate how the research helps the community heal from historical trauma and demonstrates that the researcher understands the community's culture and responsible ethics. And this is an idea about how research can be confusing. It's like going hunting, you need a path. So research is hunting for knowledge and for truth. So when I recently did a research in 2014, I went to 5 different communities, 2 in Australia, Canada, and 1 on the Flathead Reservation. And all of the people who I interviewed told me pretty much the same thing. And this is the research conceptual model that I developed from that research. And I can send this out to people if you want to have it. I know the text is pretty small. What can be gathered as data? You don't want to take any sacred articles or sacred things. This is an elder in Australia, and he's gathering bits of rock that were used at a campsite. And he's showing me these artifacts, but we can't take them away because they're a sacred place in Australia. And this is an emu egg that's been painted. It tells a story of the honey ants. I don't know if you're familiar with honey ants, but people have used them. They bite off the abdomen and it's honey inside. So other things that can be researched are stories, songs, histories, dreams, and ceremonies, and the method of the collecting of the data. Sometimes elders will tell you the wrong thing because they've been impacted by irresponsible researchers, and they'll say the wrong thing. And if they're in a sharing circle, another one will whisper, "I don't remember that," and the elder will poke, "Shh, be quiet." So here's some ideas of how to collect the data. Abiotic and biotic data go into the land, like Ed said, checking out the streams. You can collect information on a potlatch or a seal hunt. You can visit one-on-one with an elder. You can talk to people in a sharing circle. Not just one visit, not to grab and go. Create relationships with the land, the food, and the people. So gathering stories. Indigenous people use stories in teaching and learning. And it's within that story, there's a place for honoring oneself, family, community, environment. And each concept and event is set in place that is based on the history, place, environment, or whatever of that tribe. So Dr. Pamela Croft is an Aboriginal researcher in Queensland, and she was the one that said, "I collect stories from my elders because I was taken away as a child, and I make mud maps from the mud in the local streams to show where I come from." Stories are the tools of data collection, analysis, and interpretation. And the story allows the participant to tell their experience from their perspective. They provide data on a variety of issues. And Bajeli Chalisa talked about that in her presentation at ARA. But there's many kinds of stories. And you need a relationship with the storyteller and with the story. And is this really what the storyteller means? And it may not be the same for every listener. And is the storyteller creatable? Like I said, some elders will tell the wrong story just to confuse the researcher. Some cultural ceremonies can be used as data. You need permissions to talk about the sun dance and the sweat lodge and the smudge. Lots of different kinds of dances can be used as data. And among the Republic of the Congo, they have dances for rain, to feel good, and to prevent depression. Some researchers from the Congo have researched those dances. Dreams can be gathered as data too, because the jingle dress came to the people as a dream. The grandfather was ill, and he had a dream about his granddaughters dancing with the jingle dress, and it made him well. He said to the girls, "You need to do this dress. It came in a dream to me." And the girls did, and they did the dance, and the grandfather got well. And Black Elk had a dream about the coming of the cows and the white people. I think that collecting tribal songs are really a good research article because it helps the elder self-esteem and helps with the language, and it leads to tribal self-determination. And you can use the hunch of your research question. Will collecting and singing old drum songs will bring the language back? Will that happen? And I have seen in my own tribe it is happening. Researchers can also use environmental and wildlife data, get elder stories before and after, what new animals are in the Arctic. Right now, there's robins that are going up to the Arctic, robins, the bird, and they have no word for that in Inuktitut. They're looking at what happens in Greenland, climate change over time, and animal behavior in the landscape. This is a picture of a mud map that was drawn, and Indigenous art can be used as research data. So how can this knowledge inform your research problem? What Indigenous knowledge have your participants or your community written? What have they sung songs about or have oral histories about your research problem? So I want to caution people that when you write your research proposal as an Indigenous researcher, it's important to put yourself in the problem. So this is the format that I use with my students. Introduce the problem statement in a paragraph, describe the problem and the community, what it wants to solve. One time I was up at Stonechild College and I had a presentation about Indigenous research, and the elders really were against all kinds of research. And once I said to them, the research can help solve problems in your community. And they said, oh, is that what research is all about? Solving the problems that we want to solve? And then they were much more agreeable to having research in their community. Then write a statement about your hunch. What do you think will be a solution to this problem? And turn the hunch into a question. Will blank, blank, blank solve the problem? And then state the question in a positive way, a resilience question. And then I have the students write their proposal with their story, why you want to do the research. Discuss the tribal specific elements of your own place. Under the tribal specific element, write a paragraph on your own story, putting your voice into the proposal. That is so important in Indigenous research. Who are you? Where do you come from? What is this place you are from and researching from? Why you want to do the research? What paradigm or worldview are you researching from? What does this project mean for your tribe or community? And how will your project include the elements of the Indigenous research? And those are the ones that we saw in the spider web. So I also have them write how it will move the community forward. What about the Indigenous methodologies are you thinking? And what is the method that you are gathering data, and why did you choose this method? So I have a friend and colleague who teaches in the Masters of Public Health program at the University of Montana. And she said to me, I don't know anything about Indigenous research. And I said to her, well, our students are coming to you for their master's degree, so you better learn about how to do it, how you will watch their project unfold. So applying the elements of the conceptual framework, and that's the one with the heart and the spider web. And how will you protect the human subjects? Not the IRB from the university, but the IRB from the community, from the tribe. You'll need an advisory board to guide your research. Who are they? Why did you choose them? How will you disseminate the information to the community? And the literature review is the writings of other people on the topic. But other ideas, what have the communities written about? What are their oral histories? You can incorporate those into the literature review. And a description of the methods you are using to collect the data. think about the ethics and the desires of the community when you're analyzing, disseminating, and presenting your findings to the community. Maybe the people in the community are elders from Northern Cheyenne. Maybe they don't speak English. Maybe they're elders from Aboriginal tribes in Australia. You have to think about a way that you're going to present that data in the findings. This is Pam Moorcroft, who you saw her mud map. And this is how she presents her data to communities who don't understand English and they only speak their Aboriginal language, especially in Western Queensland, Northern Australia. And she makes a map and she writes down everything that she discovered on the map. Data sovereignty is key. The researcher is just borrowing those stories. It's not the professor, not the university, not the government. The research done in Aboriginal lands and the resulting data belong to the community. This is not the case in Australia. In Australia, the government who funds the research owns the data. And the data can be expressed qualitative and quantitative. I was really surprised when I went to Australia to hear that the community doesn't own the data or their stories. That's really, I thought it was really rude. So the IRB, the dreaded IRB, but it's important because it protects the people, the culture, the land, and the home university will also require an IRB if you're a student, and that protects the university and the people. And publishing, permission from the council, TRIRB. Authorship, do the people who are in the community want to be co-authors of your paper, of your book? That's important to know. So Indigenous research within the academy, this is a picture of the library at Harvard University. And it's very hard sometimes to get Indigenous methods into universities that are very Western and Stoic oriented, even though Harvard was developed for Native people. I'm not sure if they still prevent Indigenous research methods as a legitimate method. So I want to talk a little bit about the American Indigenous Research Association. And this is the website. Every year, except they haven't done it in the past 2 years, we've had a conference and we bring together the wonderful speakers who have written books about Indigenous research. So here is Sean Wilson, Vajeli Chalisa from Botswana, Vajeli Chalisa signing her book. Sean, this is Linda Smith and Ko Kuru, who just finished her PhD last year with Sean. Ku Kahakalau, who is an amazing researcher from Hawaii, and my friend Carol Baldwin, and a group from the Blood Reserve up in Canada who came to present. The American Indigenous Research Association has on its website all of the presentations from the past 7 years when I was the president. My friend and I started this when I came back from Australia, because Australia has an Indigenous Research Association out of Queensland University in Queensland. And I said to my friend, Dawn Adams, we need to have this. She said, we should have a conference. She said, I'll make the website. I said, okay, I'll get money. So I went to a friend of mine, Emily Salloway, and she said, oh, we can get IMBRI money for that. So the first conference we had was funded by IMBRI. It was at Salish Kootenai College, and the grant, I guess she was the overseer in Bertoloni, she was up in the stands in the audience, and we did a final dance, a round dance, and she whispered to me, "You can have money for next year." So we did the first one on $13,000. It was pretty amazing. It was wonderful. And I wasn't able to pay a lot of money to the presenters, but we had no student presenters that year. The next year, we had keynotes and student presenters. And Sammy Matsaw and his wife has presented. Dr. Harrington has presented. And of course, Shockey and Ed has presented at it. But all of their presentations are on the website. So if you go to the American Indigenous Research Association.org, you can see them and see all their ideas. So I want to share a little bit about how there's a lot of information now, community-based participatory research. Well, that's all fine, and it folds into Indigenous methods, but it doesn't really talk about the passion of the research. And it doesn't really talk about why the researcher wants to do this and who owns the data and the methods of collecting the data. You can see here from the community-based part, the community is the primary unit. They call it the unit rather than the partner. And it builds on the strengths of the community. That's the questions of resilience. And it does collaborate with the academic institution and the community partners. And knowledge is gained through the partnership and translated into action. But it doesn't really discuss the tribal protocols, the methods of data collection, who owns the data, the culture of the community and empowerment of the community. So I say that community-based participatory research can fold into Indigenous methods. I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions? I would love to answer questions.
Lori, this is Kim. This is fantastic. In my work with developing tribal colleges from place to place, and I was an old retired Army officer living in Europe as well for times and everything else. I had the opportunity to look at libraries, and even in modern days, they still have, American Indian godless, half naked, etc. And everything that you present here is exactly what has to be done. Whatever the tribal colleges need to understand these types of things, they need to be able to have their own research and whatever, because we still have these attitudes. And everything you're talking about, is absolutely correct. You go back and look in Europe and whatever, they still have the records of the early people that discovered America,
Yep.
et cetera, and have no concept of what really we as Native Americans know and understand about our past, our past people and tribal areas they went into and why they went into it, understanding plants that could, endemic, in terms of the types of medicines. And I watched that in Pine Ridge. I remember I got the flu one time. Immediately, some of the women went out, got the different roots they needed, made the coffee, and give it back to me. So you are absolutely on everything you've shown here needs to be done internally with the Indian tribal colleges and whatever, and the tribes, as well as going out there in other areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Dr. Lambert, we did have someone with a raised hand. I believe it was Michael Derglow.
Okay.
If I said that right. Did you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Yeah, good to see you, Lori.
Good to see you too.
Thank you for all that good stuff, that good information. Just wanted to let you know that we just recently formed or got tribal council approval to form a reservation review board
Awesome.
research review. So that covers all non-IRB research that comes onto the reservation. As you all know, there's a lot of folks that come to the reservation that want to do research that are not necessarily associated with the university sometimes, but we want to make sure that those don't get, slip through the cracks, and we want to cover those it's all non-human research that's done on a reservation. So yeah, I will
Yeah,
share that with you, Lori, as soon as we get it finalized.
that's really awesome. And I want to commend Salish Kootenai College too. Recently received a big grant from NSF to have an Indigenous research department. And one of the person who took over the American Indigenous Research Association from me, Ren Freeman, has taken the director position. And my position at Salish Kootenai College was eliminated, and I was really distressed about that. But I'm really happy that the Indigenous Research Department is happening. It's so important for the students to be able to express themselves in the way they want to. Thanks for that question. What I think is really important is how the students set up their proposal and include all of the elements that I initiated in this PowerPoint. I can share the PowerPoint. This is PowerPoint is being recorded, so I'm not sure if you want the whole recording, or you can ask Sasha to pull out my part of it. I can share the.
That is up to you, Dr. Lambert. Apologies for interrupting you.
Yeah.
If you are willing to share the PowerPoint, we can add that to the website, and then I can let participants know it's there. If you're willing to share the recording as well, we can also put that on the website.
I think it's really important for young researchers who are Native and non-Native, especially, who are doing research in Indigenous communities, to have this information. I also have a book out. It's called Research for Indigenous Survival, and it's on Amazon. And it was published by SKC Press. And Bob Bigart was the editor, and he is amazing as an editor. He has such a fine eye, and all of the royalties go to SKC Press, and it's being handled by I forgot what university it is, but anyways, it's on Amazon if you want to take a look. It's not a very long book. Research for Indigenous Survival.
Looks like we also had a question from Summer in the chat. Do you have any other ideas or examples of how to present data and findings from research to community members in a way that they can relate to and use?
So that's where your tribal advisory board comes in, and you can ask the tribal advisory board, what's the best way? Should I present at a tribal council meeting? Should I present it at a meeting with the students, with the families? You need to collaborate with your tribal council so that they can help the researcher to present the findings. I think that's important because you might need a translator, and the translator will come from the tribe. It's going to be different for everybody, from every tribe. Oh, thank you, Sasha, for posting that. Research for Indigenous Survival. I'm sorry? What?
This is Mike again. I'm just going to say that it seems like the elders committees always are interested in what type of research is being done on the reservation. So we have basically three tribes here on the reservation: the Salish, the Kalispel, and the Kootenai. So the Salish and Kalispel have one elders committee, and Kootenai have an elders committee, and they always want to hear what's going on.
Yeah, I just want to say that I have been working with under an NIH grant with the university, Montana State University. And there's research being done in the elementary schools. And Nikki Graham was one of the leads on that. And she did present to the tribal council. She presented to the elders. And so she's really doing it right.
So Dr. Lambert, this is Ed. I want just a comment, not so much as a question, that's on that goes with your presentation. And thank you for your presentation, by the way. I always like listening to your story. There's excellent points, as Kim pointed out, that is needed not only for Indian country, but
you like my accent?
Yeah, I do. I like that. But I want to talk about as you talked about a little bit, the American Indian community containing and controlling what they want out. And for example, I'll give you for example. So there's some touchy subjects within Indian community, and one is language. Some want the language out, some want it, some don't want it out. And if you're in the community, that's your say, because you're in a sovereign nation. But the ones on the outside that would like to learn that, I'm just saying that you have to have patience and respect for the tribe and what they want to do. If they want it out, it's out. If they don't want it out, they don't. And you have to respect that. You know, you can whine around and cry all you want and throw a fit. It's not going to help that situation. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that out, is all.
I'll tell you another little story here about the MSU researchers. They were all PhD faculty, and they were doing the research to get tenure. And we went up to Stone Child with this one researcher. He's from Bangs, Texas. We went up several times to try to get an interview with the council. And it took us a year, actually, of going back and forth to get that. But he was very amazing. He started out telling everybody, I'm from a small town like you. I've had these problems with behavioral stuff in my community. They love him. In fact, the elder said, he's my new boyfriend. So you know that he's been accepted, by the group, by the community.
Yeah.
Dr. Lambert, this is Sasha again. It looks like we have Cindy Higgins with a hand raised. You're welcome to unmute yourself, Cindy.
Hi, Dr. Lambert. This is Cindy Higgins from down. I think we've talked on the phone before.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking my question. I had a question regarding your IRB methods especially for Native American students in non-tribal colleges or universities across, I guess, internationally. So when, as an IRB or a doctoral student gets ready to put together their IRB, a lot of times they want to look at how to put together a really good Indigenous research with Indigenous methods. And sometimes they run into that issue of IRBs not sure what to do with IRB with Indigenous research methods. And I know sometimes they get told, what do you mean storytelling? So they're not really sure. And I guess like myself as a doctoral student, that was kind of a challenge for me, especially as I was putting together my conceptual framework. So I think those are just kind of questions that how can we encourage our students and ourselves as students? How can we encourage ourselves to put together a really good, strong conceptual framework that works within an IRB in a non-tribal college?
First of all, on your committee, they need to be educated about Indigenous research. And they have to learn that Indigenous research is an acceptable form of research methods. And second of all, be strong, fight. If someone on the committee doesn't want that kind of method or IRB method, maybe you can replace them with someone else. But I think educating the people who are in charge of your doctoral program need to be educated. I was really lucky when I did mine. I had a woman who was very open. She was from Baylor University. She was very open to Indigenous research methods. And at the same time, they dovetail with feminist research methods. So you might want to say, okay, they're feminist research methods and they're Indigenous feminist research methods. But I think the most important thing is trying to educate your committee and being strong and saying, this is what I want to do. This is my degree. And you're not going to tell me that I can't do it this way. I've known doctoral students. In fact, I think Co was the one who fought for that. She went to Lesley University and she fought for that for her committee so that she could present in a way that she wanted to. It's probably not very helpful.
Well, I guess the one thing is it's, I've gotten past that part. So I had a really strong dissertation chair, but what I get from non-native colleges or tribal universities or anything like that is one dean asked me, what is a culturally relevant, why do we have to teach like that? And, what does that example look like and why should we allow this method? So I often wonder about the struggles that some of those students have in those different areas. And so and how do we, because sometimes I get calls from students, they're a little frustrated. And because I'm not in that department, I really can't, I try to advocate for them the best that I can. But so I think it's just advocacy on our end to help students across, whether, they're reaching out to us because they know us or, or we're the only brown person on a university campus. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I understand. But,
I'm given the yellow light. Sorry to interrupt.
They need to be strong. They need to be strong. They need to fight for their method and they need to educate non-native people. Let me see. How students can navigate that struggle between advisors and advisors hold the power. Yeah, they need to be able to educate the advisor and show the data. There's lots of data being written by Native people out there, lots of books being written. Bring the books in, show them to the advisor and let them know that it's a preferred method for the student as an Indigenous student. That's all I can say is fight and educate. Yeah, thanks everybody. Walaliyuk.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lambert.